What do you do when someone you love no longer looks at you with eyes that recognize your soul? When their gaze becomes vacant, not empty like silence, but hollow like something else has moved in and taken over. You speak and they nod. You cry and they flinch. You reach for the heart you once knew, but it's not home anymore. That's where it begins. Not with screams or curses, not with heads spinning or strange symbols drawn in chalk. Number, demonic influence begins in subtleties. In the slow disappearance of a presence you once felt deeply. It's not that they don't love you anymore. It's that something inside them doesn't want them to. Something that feeds off disconnection, that starves them of empathy and replaces every tender instinct with cold calculation. You can feel it. You don't want to say it because it sounds mad, because the world has taught you to treat darkness like a metaphor, not a reality. But what if it's real? What if there are forces that wear human skin and speak through those we love, only to unravel everything we thought was sacred? The eyes are the first to betray. There is a knowing absence there, like a theater where the actor has left the stage, but the curtains remain drawn. Their laughter comes from memory, but lacks spirit. Their affection, once instinctive, now feels rehearsed. You say, "You've changed," and they say, "I'm fine," but you know the truth. Something else is wearing their voice, something else is mirroring their gestures. And at night when the world quiets and your intuition grows louder, you know you're not imagining it. You've loved them long enough to recognize when the soul has gone silent, and what replaces it does not seek connection, it seeks control. At first, it's small, the way they ignore the things that once mattered, the way their presence drains the room, the way your spirit shrinks around theirs. You second-guess yourself. You blame stress, work, fatigue. But deep down, you feel it. That this is not just emotional detachment. This is spiritual displacement. You're looking into the eyes of someone you love and sensing something ancient, cold, and hungry looking back. You remember how they used to weep for others' pain, how they once held you like the world would end without your heartbeat. And now they recoil from your vulnerability. Your tears confuse them. Your light irritates them. Your faith threatens them, and yet you stay. Because you remember who they were. Because love makes you believe you can bring them back. But how do you reach a soul that's no longer in the room? How do you rescue someone from a darkness they don't even see? That's where it starts. Not with confrontation, but with recognition. The moment you stop lying to yourself. The moment you admit, in a whisper so fragile it feels like betrayal, something is wrong. And that whisper becomes a doorway, not into fear, but into the truth you've been avoiding. Because denial is comfort, but awareness is the beginning of spiritual war. You begin to notice that their smile doesn't warm you anymore. It chills you. There's a new hunger in it, a sharpness where there used to be softness. You remember how they used to smile when they saw you. Genuine, effortless, like sunlight on skin. But now their smile feels like strategy. It appears when you're vulnerable, when you're questioning yourself, when your guard is down, and slowly you realize it's not a smile of love, it's a smile of leverage. Demonic influence doesn't always roar. Sometimes it seduces. It cloaks itself in charm. It studies you, learns your fears, memorizes your triggers, not to hold you through them, but to use them as entry points. That's what possession looks like in modern times. Not spinning heads, but twisted intimacy. The weaponization of connection. They know when to praise you, when to mock you, when to disappear just long enough for you to beg. And every time you do, something inside you dies. A little more of your voice, your light, your sense of truth. They don't have to scream to dominate. All they have to do is keep you confused. And confusion becomes their altar. The more you doubt yourself, the more power they gain. You say, "That hurt me," and they laugh. Or worse, they say, "You're too sensitive." And suddenly your pain is an inconvenience. Your boundaries are a burden. Your truth is too much. You start shrinking to keep the peace. You twist your spirit to match their moods. You mistake manipulation for passion, silence for strength, cruelty for honesty. And all the while you keep loving them. Not because they still deserve it, but because you remember who they were before the shadows took over. But this isn't them anymore. Not fully. Something has latched on. something that feeds off your confusion and calls it chemistry, something that drains you and calls it love. They smile and you feel small. They touch you and you feel cold. They compliment you only after you've bled for them. And you begin to realize this isn't love. This is spiritual warfare disguised as intimacy. Their presence doesn't heal you anymore. It haunts you. It tempts you. It steals from you without ever laying a hand. And worst of all, it makes you question your own sanity. But you are not crazy. You are awake. You are seeing through the veil. You are recognizing that demonic energy doesn't always come through strangers or shadows. Sometimes it comes through the ones we swore we'd never walk away from, the ones we prayed for, the ones we trusted. And that's the hardest truth to swallow, that the person you love may no longer be the person you're dealing with, that something has entered them, not because they are evil, but because they were wounded, and in their wound they opened a door that now stands between you and the soul you ache to bring back. It's in their tone now, in the way they speak to you, not loud, not violent, not openly cruel, but sharp, calculated. Their words are no longer bridges, they're blades. Every conversation becomes a trap, every question a test, every answer a wound. You try to explain your feelings and their response slices through your spirit, leaving you exposed, raw, ashamed. This is not a misunderstanding. This is an agenda. Language becomes their altar, and you, the sacrifice. You don't know when it changed. Maybe it was the first time they mocked your dreams. Maybe it was when they turned your honesty into ammunition. Maybe it was when your vulnerability became entertainment. But now you're walking through a minefield of syllables. One wrong word, one wrong look, and they detonate. Possession is not always about violent transformation. Sometimes it's the slow poisoning of the sacred, the steady twisting of language into a weapon. When someone you love becomes fluent in contempt, fluent in deception, fluent in control, that's when you know something ancient has taken residence. Because words are spells, and what they cast on you is not love, it's domination. They speak and your body tightens. They laugh and it's not with you, it's at you. They apologize, but only after you're bleeding. And somehow, they still make you feel like you caused it. This is how the influence works. It uses their voice to destroy your truth. And the more you try to explain yourself, the deeper you fall into their maze. You lose yourself trying to be understood by something that only seeks to confuse you. They don't want clarity, they want control. And the more articulate your pain becomes, the more subtle their attacks grow. They'll say, I didn't mean it that way. And yet somehow, you always end up doubting yourself. You'll replay conversations for hours trying to find what you did wrong. But it wasn't you, it was the spell in their speech. The demon does not need to scream when it can whisper, when it can sow seeds of unworthiness through sarcasm, when it can erode your boundaries with carefully chosen guilt, when it can embed shame in every compliment, every question, every half smile. It makes love feel like a test you're always failing, and still you stay because you remember the old voice, the voice that once sang you to sleep, the voice that once spoke life into your dreams. But that voice is gone, or buried, or chained in the dark corners of their soul, and what's speaking now is something else, something that knows your softest places and uses them as entry points, something that wants to turn your power into silence, and your silence into surrender. But the moment you start listening not just to what they say, but how you feel after they've said it, that's when you begin to break the spell, because demons feed on confusion, and your clarity is a sword they cannot hold. They stop talking, not in the way that signals peace or reflection, but in the way that feels like they're listening to something you can't hear. You sit beside them and feel lonelier than when you're alone. Their silence doesn't feel like absence. It feels like surveillance. A quiet so heavy it presses on your chest. There's hunger in it. A hunger that doesn't speak but watches, studies, waits. At first you call it moodiness, then detachment. Then you begin to realize something is observing you through their stillness, something that doesn't blink. You look at them, hoping to find comfort, hoping to find the old warmth, but instead you find a coldness that isn't theirs, a presence that doesn't belong. Demonic influence doesn't always shout. Sometimes it sits in silence and feeds. It feeds on confusion, on submission, on energy, especially yours, because your energy was once their light, but now it is their fuel. You notice it when you enter the room, how your joy irritates them, how your peace seems to provoke something inside them. They won't say it, but you'll feel it. You'll feel the weight of unspoken disapproval, the invisible teeth gnawing at your calm. They don't attack you with words anymore. They drain you with absence. You talk and they barely respond. You cry and they stare. You celebrate and they go silent. You start shrinking in your joy to protect their moods. You dim yourself to avoid confrontation. And before you know it, you've become a ghost in your own home, while something else grows bolder in theirs. It's not them. Or at least it's not only them. It's what's latched onto them. What's feeding on their pain, their regret, their wounds. What you don't confront, you inherit. And what they refuse to face is now living through them. The silence is not empty. It's inhabited. And the more they avoid healing, the more space that darkness takes. You try to reach them. You say their name with softness, hoping they'll return. But all you get is that hollow stare, like they're listening to something older than your love. And you realize, this isn't just depression. This isn't just numbness. This is spiritual starvation. They've let something else in, and now it's consuming the parts of them you once held dear. You start to whisper prayers beneath your breath, not out of superstition, but instinct. Your spirit knows what your mind still resists. This is not just psychological, this is warfare. And silence has become its disguise, but silence cannot survive the voice of truth. And the moment you name what you feel, not as moodiness, not as disconnection, but as influence, the atmosphere changes, because darkness can only hide in what you refuse to see. And now, you see. You start feeling their emotions before they speak, not empathy or invasion. Their anger enters the room before their footsteps. It lingers like smoke. It clings to your breath. And yet, when you ask them what's wrong, they act like nothing happened. They smile, shrug, deny, but the tension doesn't lie. You begin to notice a pattern. They're calm when you're anxious and enraged when you find peace, as if your serenity threatens something in them, as if healing invites a presence that cannot survive in light. You realize their rage isn't always theirs. It doesn't come from the present moment. It doesn't come from logic. It comes like a possession, sudden, wild, misplaced. You touch a nerve you didn't know existed, and suddenly they erupt. Or worse, they grow cold, cruel, calculating. They punish you with silence or sarcasm. They twist your words. They weaponize your honesty. You've never seen their eyes like this, not just angry, but altered. Something else blinks behind them, something ancient and hungry. You feel it watching you, through them. You can't name it, but your soul flinches when it surfaces. You used to feel safe in their arms. Now even their touch feels conditional, charged, tense. You find yourself walking on eggshells, afraid to trigger the beast beneath their calm. But that's the thing about demonic influence. It doesn't need to possess the whole person. It just needs access, a wound, a gate, a part of them they've refused to heal, and through that portal, rage comes roaring. It speaks in accusations that feel too precise to be random. It knows your deepest shame and throws it at you when you least expect it. It mimics love, but it burns when you get close. You used to fight back. Now you go quiet. You tell yourself you're being mature, but really, you're surviving. Avoiding the next outburst, protecting yourself from the next shapeshift. But even silence cannot keep you safe when the influence wants war. You sense it. This isn't just human pain. This is something older, smarter. It studies your reactions, your hesitations, your emotional blind spots. It turns your love into leverage, your forgiveness into a weapon. You see them become someone else, just for a moment, then return as if nothing happened. But you remember how their voice dropped, how their stare darkened, how the air turned cold. And in that moment, you weren't just scared of them. You were scared for them, because you saw what's growing inside. And you know, if they don't face it, it will consume them. Rage is the smoke, not the fire. The fire is spiritual, and you can't put it out with logic or patience or love alone. You're not fighting their personality. You're confronting the parasite feeding on their pain. And when you stop denying it, when you stop calling it just stress, you start reclaiming your power. Because truth is an exorcism, and your courage is what breaks the mirror. There comes a moment when your healing starts to offend them, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your clarity disrupts their illusion. Your light irritates the presence that has rooted itself in them. At first, it's subtle. You speak about growth, and they change the subject. You mention forgiveness, and they scoff. You talk about truth, and their eyes narrow. You sense it. Your evolution feels like a betrayal to them, but not to their soul, to the shadow now operating within. Demonic influence cannot coexist with light. It recoils from it. It mocks it. It seeks to extinguish it, especially when it sees that light shining in someone who refuses to break. You'll hear it in their voice. You think you're better than me now. All this spiritual stuff it's nonsense. You've changed, and you've softened, deepened, awakened, but to them, to what's in them, that change looks like danger. Because the brighter you shine, the more it exposes their darkness, and the more it's exposed, the more it lashes out. They won't always attack directly. Sometimes it comes through sarcasm, dismissiveness, subtle sabotage. They'll tempt you back into old patterns, push your buttons, trigger your wounds, anything to pull you out of presence and back into pain. Because pain is predictable. It's where the influence feels strongest. But you are no longer who you were. You're waking up. You're noticing that their discomfort around your peace isn't coincidence. It's resistance. Not from the soul you love, but from the darkness that's hijacked their heart. You find yourself doubting your joy, hiding your progress, making yourself small just to keep the peace. But peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of truth. And the truth is, they no longer celebrate your growth. They resent it, not because they're evil, but because they're entangled, bound to something they've never confronted. And every step you take toward freedom reminds them of their chains. That's when you realize your healing is a form of spiritual rebellion. Your joy is an act of defiance. Your truth is a sword, and they can feel it. You didn't come here to argue. You didn't come here to prove anything. But now your very presence feels like provocation, not to their essence, but to the entity clinging to their shame. It cannot survive your light, so it tries to dim it. But what it doesn't know is that you've been through your own darkness. You've walked through your own fires, and what you carry now cannot be threatened by shadows. You see it all clearly. They flinch when you shine. They mock what they fear. And you no longer apologize for your light, because your radiance is not arrogance. It's remembrance of who you are, of what's true, of what no darkness can touch, and in that remembrance, you become untouchable. At some point, you realize they aren't just carrying pain, they're possessed by it. It's no longer something they feel, it's something that speaks through them, moves through them, makes choices for them. You watch them justify things that once broke their heart. You see them protect the very wounds that are poisoning their soul. And you know, something else has taken over. Pain is meant to be felt, processed, and released. But when it's clung to, when it's nurtured like an identity, it becomes an opening, a vacancy. And what slips through that door is never interested in healing. It only wants to survive. It grows in the dark corners of unresolved memory, feeding off shame, guilt, betrayal. It whispers to them at night. It rewrites their past. It turns every offense into a permanent scar. And eventually they no longer react to reality. They react to their trauma's version of it. You become the enemy, not because you've wronged them, but because you challenge their narrative. And to the influence living inside them, that's an unforgivable act. They flinch at kindness. They bristle at honesty. They mock sincerity. Not because they're unkind, but because the presence within them fears being disarmed. Demons don't fear fire. They fear truth. They fear mirrors. They fear someone who sees through the mask. And you see it. You've seen the change in their posture, the coldness in their tone, the way they speak about love like it's currency or control. You've watched them become suspicious of anyone pure, anyone vulnerable, anyone real. And at some point, you stop taking it personally because you know, or it's not really them, not entirely. It's the pain that never got held, the wound that never got named, the heartbreak that never got grieved, and in that unspoken sorrow, something ancient took root, something that doesn't want healing. It wants permanence. It wants worship. It wants to be the lens through which they see the world. And every time you try to pull them back into light, it tightens its grip. They say things they never would have said, do things they swore they never would. You try to remind them who they were, but they look at you like a stranger, because to them, now, love feels like betrayal. Freedom feels like loss. Peace feels like weakness. You can't save them, not by force, not by pleading, not by bleeding for them. You can only witness. You can only hold the truth. You can only become the mirror they've been avoiding, the one that shows what they've become and what still lives beneath it. That's what love is, in the face of possession. Not rescue, but remembrance. You remember who they were, who they still are, buried beneath the rage, the numbness, the pride. You hold that image in your heart like a candle in a storm, not to light their path, but to remind yourself that even when something ancient has taken root, it is not stronger than the soul that aches to return. You can feel it now, the war they don't know they're in. It's in their restless energy, their unpredictable moods, their eyes that flicker with something that doesn't belong. On the surface, they look composed, but underneath you sense the chaos, a storm twisting through their spirit, a battle between what's real and what's hijacked them. And you've been pulled into the crossfire. You try to love them, but it feels like standing between two voices, one whispering of healing, the other screaming for destruction. One moment, they hold you like they remember. The next, they turn cold, distant, defensive, as if the memory of your love awakens something in them they're trying to bury. But you've come too far to ignore it now. This isn't just emotional instability, it's spiritual warfare, and they don't even see the weapons in their hands. That's how influence works. It blinds its host, but makes everyone around them feel insane. You feel it in your bones. Their presence no longer brings peace, it brings static. Your body tightens around them. Your intuition screams, but your heart remembers the laughter, the softness, the sacredness that once lived in their breath, and so you stay, hoping your love will be the anchor that pulls them back. But what happens when love becomes the rope they use to strangle your spirit? What happens when you're no longer holding them? You're holding the thing inside them. That's the part that breaks you, realizing you're no longer fighting with them. You're fighting for them, and they can't even see it. They think you're overreacting. They think you're too sensitive. They call your intuition paranoia, your discernment judgment. And still you try. You pray under your breath. You speak words of life even when met with silence. You pour grace into conversations that deserve retreat. But you're tired, not just emotionally, spiritually, because fighting the unseen will cost you more than logic can explain. It drains your sleep, it clouds your joy, it makes you question your own divinity. But here's what you must remember. You are not powerless. You were never meant to carry them, only to see them, to name the battle, to stop pretending it's normal. That's where your strength returns. When you stop making excuses for what you know is spiritual. When you stop silencing your gut just to preserve the illusion of peace. This is not about them anymore. It's about you, your light, your sanity, your soul. Because even though the war is within them, the battlefield has bled into you. And now you must choose to stay in the line of fire or to step out of the chaos and reclaim your clarity. Not in anger, but in sacred defiance. You are not abandoning them. You are refusing to abandon yourself. Because if they ever come back, they'll need someone who didn't forget the sound of their true voice, even if it's buried under screams no one else can hear. There comes a moment when you realize love is not always rescue. Sometimes love is release. Sometimes it's standing at the edge of someone's descent and knowing you cannot follow them into that darkness without losing yourself. You've tried, you've fought, you've prayed with words you didn't even know your soul remembered. You've begged the light to return to their eyes, the warmth to return to their voice. But the truth is, some battles are not yours to win. Because love can't heal what someone chooses to protect. And it can't reach where someone's soul has chosen not to return. And yet, You still love them, not blindly, not foolishly, but fiercely, spiritually, eternally, because you've seen the part of them no darkness could touch. You've held the sacredness in them even when they forgot it existed. That love, the kind that remembers someone's essence when they're drowning in everything they're not, is a rare and holy thing. But even holy things must learn when to let go, not out of bitterness, not out of defeat, but because the deeper law of love is freedom. And freedom means letting someone walk their own path, even if it leads away from you, even if it takes them through more fire, even if they never return. You can still love them, you can still bless them, but you must stop bleeding for them, because the demon was never yours to cast out. It was theirs to face. The influence you've named, it cannot thrive in truth. And the moment you stopped pretending, the moment you said out loud what your soul had long known, the grip loosened. Not just on them, on you, because it was never just about their possession. It was about your awakening, about you learning to trust what cannot be seen, about you honoring your discernment even when no one believed you, about you becoming the kind of soul that sees through illusions and still chooses compassion. That is power. That is divinity. That is what breaks generational curses and spiritual silence. So now, you stand here, changed, not hardened, but clear. You see the world for what it is. You see the spiritual behind the psychological, the energetic behind the emotional. You see how influence hides in wounds, how darkness disguises itself as apathy, charisma, even love. And you are no longer afraid to speak its name. You've walked through the fire of confusion. You've battled in rooms no one else knew were battlegrounds, and you survived, not just with scars, but with wisdom. The kind of wisdom that doesn't scream. It simply knows. And now you know. You can love someone and still walk away. You can pray for them and still protect yourself. You can see their soul beneath the possession and still choose peace over proximity. This is what it means to love in truth. Not in fantasy, not in fear, but in sacred, sovereign knowing, the kind that says, I see you. I remember who you are. And if you ever return, I'll still be here, not waiting, but whole,